Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair and his ice-cold demeanor and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you. The guilty will be punished.
My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott.
Come on, guys, don't do this. If I don't get breakfast, I get real grumpy. I don't think you like me grumpy. And you go in pieces, asshole.
Let's kick some ass.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break This Podcast, the fan podcast celebrating the cinematic career of action legend Dolph Lundgren. Today, we're going back to 2019 and taking a look at the zombie horror action flick Dead Trigger. In this adaptation of a popular mobile game, Dolph takes on an army of zombies once again for the second time in his career, this time starring as Kyle Walker, a tough soldier who is tasked with leading a team of teenage video gamers against a town overrun by the undead.
It is our job to kill the dead. Ground Zero was the first place the virus appeared.
Ground Zero holds many secrets that could lead to a cure.
Okay, rookies. Time to get your hands dirty. Remember, no shooting. We don't want to wake up this entire infested city.
Captain, we got company. They're everywhere!
All right, Dead Triggers, show me what you can do.
I'm your host, Sean, and joining me for this discussion is Scott Murphy, host of All 90s Action All the Time and New Horror Express. Scott, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for agreeing to this one.
That's no problem at all. It's a pleasure to come on.
Well, yeah, I mean, this particular film that we're discussing today, I think I should probably say we kind of had this in the pipeline for a while, but due to the nature of both of your shows, I figured this film was I kind of handpicked it for you, to be perfectly honest, because there's a little bit of horror. I put horror in quotes, to be perfectly honest, but if you want to call it that. But it's a mixture of horror and action. And I figured, considering your two podcasts, I figured it was kind of, I don't know, I thought it was a good fit for both of us. So this should be a fun conversation. Thank you again for coming back on, or for coming on for the first time. Because I think, we've spoken a few times, but I've been on your show. I've had the pleasure of being on your show, twice, I want to say?
Yes, twice. Yes, you've been on twice. For Surviving the Game, which I don't know when your episode comes out, but the episode, from my perspective, comes out next week, but it comes out earlier than this episode comes out.
Yeah, and then we also chatted, was it Army of One?
Yeah,
Joshua
Army of
Tree,
One.
right?
We just, we discussed that one too. So it's two times you've come on the podcast. So yeah, we've been talking a bit, and I think we've been talking a bit about what I could come on for in your show for a while as well. But yeah, we finally managed to get round to it.
Yeah, we did, because I remember, this conversation has been in the works for almost well over a year, I want to say. And I feel kind of bad. I should say that right now, Scott, because I imagine here we were, I was building it up, hey, we got this movie Dead Trigger coming out. It's Dolph, it's zombies, there's action. And so I imagine you were probably thinking like, oh, wow, this sounds pretty cool. And then you watched the final product, and Man, you really took one for the team for this one today. So thank you.
Oh, that's no problem at all. I'm used to watching terrible movies, so it's okay. I mean, like, you'll know the DTV Connoisseur podcast. I've watched a couple of terrible Steven Seagal films for that. So, this is what I do. I come on and talk about bad films on other podcasts.
Well, I mean, I think all 90s action all the time. I mean, I love that particular podcast. I think the name for that particular show pretty much explains itself. I mean, you look at the glory period of 90s action films, but with your other podcast, New Horror Express, I mean, man, is it fair to say that on that particular show, I mean, independent horror cinema is kind of the focus of it. So this film that we're talking about today really, it kind of aligns perfectly, I think we could say, right?
It absolutely does. Absolutely, yes. Independent horror cinema, that is the main focus of New Horror Express. Unfortunately, I'm kind of winding it down just because of schedule and busy, and I don't really want to stop it, but I am bringing it to an end. But that has been the focus of it, and I've been doing interviews, starting in 2018 going forward, with a variety of indie horror directors, writers, actors. So yes, I'm very familiar with the world of indie horror.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we should probably say, I mean, I imagine that, obviously this particular film, Dead Trigger, that we're discussing today, obviously this is the second time that Dolph has taken on zombies. I don't know if you've seen the first time, but the first film he did where he was in a post-apocalyptic world that was overrun by zombies was a film called Battle of the Damned, which I don't know if you've seen it or not, but I will just say right now, it's not like Battle of the Damned is amazing or anything, but when you look at that film compared to this one, Battle of the Damned is so much better than this particular film. And I will say, I think one of the big reasons for it, I mean, I think the production values are put to better use in Battle of the Damned, but also, I mean, that film had the fast running zombies, which really adds, in my opinion, stakes and threat. This film, I mean, the zombies are barely even moving. Like it doesn't feel like there's any stakes at all at any point in this one.
I think with the slower zombies, you need quantity. There's not enough quantity. Because they're still threatening. The slower zombies, the ambling zombies are still threatening in, the Romero films. I mean, the original Dead trilogy, not so much some of his later zombie films. But, definitely in the original Dead trilogy. And there is other films where, the ambling zombies are threatening. They make a good threat. And the running zombies, I don't know, it doesn't make all that much sense. And then I guess that's kind of become popularized by 28 Days Later, which the filmmakers of 28 Days Later would argue it's technically not a zombie film because they're not technically not undead. They're infected with a virus. But anyway, people generally think of it as a zombie film, so it's technicality.
Well, I mean, that's an excellent segue because, I mean, I remember, I'm sure you do as well, but I remember back in the early 2000s, there was a real second coming, a second wind of the zombie genre. Okay, we had 28 Days Later, we had the Resident Evil movie, and then Dawn of the Dead. I think Dawn of the Dead, the remake, the one directed by Zack Snyder. Yeah. All of those films really pumped life again, pun intended, I should say, but really pumped life again into the zombie genre. And so, I mean, me personally, I've never been a big fan of zombie films, but I mean, I can certainly respect, that as a subgenre, I think we can say. But what's really interesting, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well, but it seems like, it seems like anyone who wants to make a horror film, especially on the cheap, inevitably seems to kind of rely on zombies as being the as being the easy antagonist. And so while the genre did have a comeback and a second coming, they really within the past, I mean, is it fair to say within the past 15, 20 years, they've really just completely ridden it into the ground to where, I mean, it's just, it's become old hat at this point, right?
Yes, it is a subgenre that is kind of overflowing with films, and like you say, since that kind of second coming of the zombie film that started, with like you say, 20 Days Later, Resident Evil, Dawn of the Dead, even Shaun of the Dead, all those kind of things, really brought it back into popularity. And then obviously you got like the really big budget ones that came a few years later, like World War Z, and the Walking Dead TV show kept it in the zeitgeist as well. So that, there's been a lot of zombie stuff. So you have to do something pretty special to stand out from the crowds now. And, there's not been a lot of great zombie films in recent years. There has been some, that like there's Train to Busan, which came out, I think, 2016, which was really great. And there's also like One Cut of the Dead, which came out the same year as this film in 2019, which is kind of meta Japanese zombie horror movie, which is kind of comedy as well, which is really fun. So you do every so often, you still get a banger, but I was for a long time, because I'm a massive fan of the original Romero Dead trilogy. And I've seen a lot of like the kind of Italian zombie films from the late 70s and 80s. And, so I've always been a fan of the zombie subgenre. But yeah, it really has taken a pounding in recent years. And it's very few and far between where you now find like a zombie film where you're like, whoa, actually, that brought something new to the subgenre. And that was actually really good.
And I think that's one of the things, I mean, but I keep mentioning it, but have you seen Battle of the Damned? Are you familiar with that one?
No, I've not seen Battle of the Damned. I've listened to your podcast episode on it, but I've not seen it.
Okay. And I think one of the things I appreciated about that particular film is, I mean, you said it perfectly. There's only so much you can do with zombies, so you really have to kind of add something new to the gimmick, or you have to kind of employ another gimmick onto that particular gimmick to make it stand out. And with Battle of the Damned, I mean, they brought in a team of robots in that particular film. So you had robots versus zombies. That's something new. You know what I mean? That's something kind of goofy that you can add. With this particular film, there's really nothing really there that helps it stand out. I mean, we should probably first of all say that this was based on a mobile shooting game. Now, I'm not much of a gamer as is, especially of mobile games. I know that mobile games are a huge business. So I guess this particular game, Dead Trigger, and then Dead Trigger 2, which I guess this film is actually based on. It's based on the sequel, is my understanding. I guess it was a big thing. It's one of those games, Scott, where you can buy the free version, but if you want better weapons and you want to make your character stand out, then it kind of has those add-ons, right, where you got to pay a little bit more. But yeah, that was. I mean, I guess you can say that is a gimmick in itself. But I mean, we've already had one zombie film that was based on a video game, and that was Uwe Boll's House of the Dead. So, having said all that, I mean, there's nothing really about this film that, stands out other than Dolph's appearance. I think we could say Dolph's appearance. He has that slicked back black hair. You know what I mean? But in the end, when you watch it, you're kind of left kind of thinking like, wow, Dolph dyed his hair for this? Like,
I'm not going to lie. I don't think it was a great dye job. Like the first time I saw him, I was like, that's quite funny. Like it's not great, I would say, unfortunately for Dolph.
Well, I'm sure you looked into the background on this one. I almost think that like a documentary on the making of this film would be fascinating, much more so than the final product. So if we just go through the background production on this particular film, it had a kind of a wild backstory. So basically, it's based on this mobile shooting game, like we said. The script was written and slated to be directed by Mike Cuff. It also Madfinger Games, that's the company that produced the mobile game. They had their hands in this one, and they had some control on it. But then I guess something happened. There's a variety of rumors going around. It sounds like that Mike Cuff was not happy with the way things were going, or maybe some other producers kind of came in and they were not happy with the way he was directing it. But I guess after only a couple days, he quit. Okay, Madfinger Games completely backed out of their participation on the film, and Scott Windhauser was hired to direct, though rumor has it that Dolph Lundgren also stepped up to direct a good chunk of the movie as well. So you kind of hear that what was going on, and I don't know, I think a lot of it kind of makes sense, but it's really interesting because when you hear that Madfinger Games backed out on this one, I can only imagine if they had stayed with this film from beginning to end, then, on the DVD, on the Blu-ray, on the synopsis, it would have said based on the popular best-selling or, popularly downloaded game, I think we can say. Mm-hmm. However, it is nowhere even mentioned on the marketing for this film, on the poster art, on the box art, anything like that. For all intents and purposes, it's just another zombie film that happens to share the same name as a popular mobile game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you aren't aware of the popular mobile game, if I never come across it, you would just think that this film is like a cheap Resident Evil knockoff. That's the main vibe of the movie, because you've got a kind of similar thing going on. You've got this evil corporation called Cyglobe, who are a bit like Umbrella Corp, and it's just everything kind of works a bit like Resident Evil. The CSU are a bit like the unit in Resident Evil. It's all very Resident Evil adjacent. So I think that's what you would think if you were completely unaware that there was this other game that's that's popular as well.
Yeah, well, I guess this started filming supposedly around 2016. Production was halted, like we said, and then picked back up within the next year. Filming wrapped around 2017. However, it wasn't officially released until 2019. I guess it was filmed in a combination of Utah and Mexico, with pretty much a good chunk of the movie getting filmed in Mexico. I'd be willing to bet that the sweat that is dripping off the characters, especially off of Dolph, is real due to the humidity that just had to be on set.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure it was that's absolutely true, because I know how hot it can get in Mexico. So I'm sure the shooting conditions were not pleasant for some of it, for all the running around. It was just so you're talking about the making of and the disaster of the making of, and how that would make an interesting documentary. I think it would, and I think I was looking up the IMDb trivia, and you never know how accurate the IMDb trivia is or whatever.
Yeah.
But there is an excellent entry in the IMDb trivia, which I feel has to be written by Mike Cuff himself, because it's just so it's such a kind of middle finger to the film as it is. I'll just try and quickly read it out. This is it. So, the day before filming, Dead Trigger director Cuff was handed a screenplay by Dolph Lundgren and Scott Windhauser that had completely rewritten Cuff's improved screenplay that he had worked 2 years on. The new screenplay was a disaster. The actors had to learn their new lines in 1 day. As a result, Cuff left on day 2, and Dolph Lundgren and Scott Windhauser directed the film up to 58 pages that were written. The rest of the film was written and completed a year later. Cuff had carefully crafted a screenplay that pleased Madfinger enough to trust him with an adaptation of their game IP. Dead Trigger was intended to be a retro 70s John Carpenter-style horror, well before Stranger Things and Barbarian made that cool again. The planned score was to have Siberian throat singers musically representing the zombies. A Moog Electronica score complemented by percussion from Kyle Crane, who had done something on Whiplash. Dead Trigger was designed to be an elevated horror with numerous plot twists that effectively used the Dead Trigger video game as its central motif / symbol. The video game was completely removed in the screenplay by Lundgren and Windhauser, while attempts were made in post-production to repair the obvious plot holes and logic issues caused by its removal. So, like, I feel like that's got to be written by Cuff, right?
Yeah. Because I mean, when you watch the completed film, Scott, you almost wonder, like who is this for? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like who wanted this? At the end of the day, I mean, because within the past, 7 to 8 years or so, we've been seeing, especially of these like independent horror and action films, a lot of these films are purely made to provide content to the streaming services. But I can't imagine any streaming service really, really wanting this. I mean, other than the fact that, okay, it's Dolph Lundgren, who everybody knows, pointing a gun at the, on the box art or whatever, on the clip art, it's Dolph holding a big gun, pointing it at the camera. And so you think, okay, that could be cool. But then the final product, it's just, again, I have to wonder, like, who wanted this? And I got to wonder, like, okay, if Madfinger Games and Mike Cuff were so invested in this, then I can almost see it being offered as like as an add-on to someone who downloads the game. You know what I mean? Like someone who downloads the game to their phone, and if they pay the extra, $5 a month or whatever, well, then you get the extra perk of seeing the movie, on it. I mean, I could see maybe that, but the fact that even they pulled out after a bit when they saw what was going on, you wonder, like again, who was this for? Because I don't know about you, but I had to pay to rent it. Sadly, okay, you think like this screams of a title that would be on Tubi or on Pluto or one of those free streaming services, but it's not even there. It's really a bit of an anomaly.
Yeah, but I'm in the same boat. I had to fork out $3.99 for this.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But no, I assumed because of like because of what I read about it, because everything. I thought when I looked up on Letterboxd, I thought this one will be one that's streaming on Tubi or Plex or something like that. And but no, it's just rentable. It's not. So and I don't know who it's made for, because I don't feel like it's satisfying for anybody. No. I don't think
all of the reviews for this film. No. Sorry, but yeah, all of the reviews for this film were terrible. It almost, when you watch the actors on screen, none of them really seem to be having fun. You know what I mean? Like it's at least that's how I felt watching it.
No, I felt the same way. I don't think anybody seems to be having fun. I mean, before starting to listen to your podcast, I had not seen tons of Dolph films, but since I started listening to your podcast about, I don't know, 18 months ago or whatever it was, I've seen a bunch of them. I've seen maybe 12 or 13 now, on top of the ones I'd seen previously. This is the least invested. This is the most bored I've ever seen him in a film. Obviously I've not seen as many as you, nowhere near as many as you, but this is absolutely the most bored I've seen him. And everybody looks kind of checked out in this movie. And I think some of the younger actors are just not very good actors, so it's hard to judge how checked out they are. But then, to be fair to them, they're not given a lot either. They're cardboard cutout characters, so it's hard to judge how good or bad an actor is when the material's so bad as well. So, and I mean, you can really tell that everything's been rushed. When you look back on the plot, particularly when you get to the twist, so many things don't make sense. A lot of things don't add up, and it just doesn't look. Yeah, it just doesn't look good. The action is pretty weak. If you're an action fan, you're not going to be particularly satisfied. If you're a horror fan, you're not going to be particularly satisfied, because there's not a great deal of good zombie action. There's not a lot of gore or practical effects. There's a lot of terrible CGI blood, which is the bane of I guess both horror and action fans' lives. So yeah, and unfortunately, there's not a lot to kind of recommend. I mean, there's a couple of funny bits, but like, and I think like if there's anybody who gets out with some credit, and it's just because he's not in the film for that long, is like Isaiah Washington is like okay in his role. He's serviceable, and he does have like one nice one-liner. And so that's about the most credit you can give anybody in this film, I think. I'm sorry to be particularly harsh, but
No, I mean, you everything you said is exactly correct. I mean, the film, to me at least, before we got recording, I mean, I said it to you. This feels like a lost film. You know what I mean? When you hear, when you hear about all the problems that they had in production, I mean, it is so abundantly clear when it's on screen. One thing too that I should probably mention is I remember when this was filming, and I actually got to speak with Scott Windhauser early on in the show. This was being filmed in some areas that were controlled by some Mexican cartels, supposedly. So they had to be really careful. So again, I think the story of the filming of this film would be fascinating. But yeah, at the end of the day, the completed movie, I mean, man, it just feels so incomplete. Okay, it really does feel like just an ash can copy of a film that maybe we weren't supposed to see. You know what I mean? But that somehow got out. I mean, it just has this real cheapness to it, which, I mean, let's be honest, okay? A cheap, low-budget film, this isn't exactly new territory for Dolph Lundgren. I mean, if you go through the show, I've watched plenty of these, okay? Sure. But this one, for me, I mean, it just, oh, goodness, it just feels like an all-new low, okay? I mean, it has the appearance and feel, like I said, of that lost film. I mean, we get scenes that just abruptly end. The sound mixing isn't exactly right in a lot of the scenes. I mean, and there's... The sets are literally, I mean, there's one scene in particular. It's the fight scene between Dolph and Oleg. I'm going to say his name wrong. I apologize. But Oleg Taktarov. Okay. There's a fight scene between them that is, the set is literally comprised of cardboard boxes. You mean literally? I mean, they're fighting among these empty cardboard boxes. And so, I mean, the best way that I can describe this film to someone, okay, because if someone is asking me, you know, hey, Sean, you've seen all these Dolph Lundgren movies, you know, have you heard of this Dead Trigger? The best way I would describe it at the end of the day is if a Halloween shop suddenly decided that they wanted to get into the movie business, okay, and they had deep enough pockets to hire Dolph Lundgren for a week, and then they were able to film using their iPhones. That's the best way to describe this film, because, I mean, everything from the makeup to the sets. I mean, and the makeup is okay. I'll give it some credit. The makeup is fine, but it honestly feels, to me at least, like it was funded by a Halloween shop. Out here in the States, we have Spirit Halloween stores. If they wanted to get into the movie business, here you go.
I think, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. And on the makeup, the makeup is not awful. But what I would say about the makeup is I've seen like better makeup in not just like The Walking Dead or like, you know, or like the Dawn of the Dead remake or, you know, whatever, not like kind of big budget horror. But I mean, like in indie horror, I have seen like some like better makeup and better like kind of effects for zombies. But yeah, I think like the makeup's not terrible, but like you say about the kind of Halloween shop thing, it's the kind of makeup that a good kind of any semi-decent kind of cosplayer would, like, you know, would have at like a kind of like if there's like a kind of horror convention or whatever, and you're, you know, dressing up as a zombie or you know, like you could. It doesn't feel like kind of elevated of like, oh, like a normal person couldn't do that. You need like professionals to do that. It feels like kind of like, yeah, like a semi-knowledgeable cosplayer could also, you know, do those effects, you know, which is kind of not what you want from a movie, because you want it to feel like a bit more special than just something you could see at a horror con.
Right. Right. And I think, you know, I mean, going back to the whole zombie subgenre, if you will, I mean, like I said, I mean, you mentioned Walking Dead earlier, and I know that Walking Dead has just legions of fans. And I'll admit, I watched the first, I want to think about this. I watched the first 2, maybe 2.5 seasons. And I mean, it was a good show. It was a fine show. But again, there's only so many ways that you can kill a zombie before it just becomes, you know what I mean? Like, okay, we've seen enough of this. And like we talked about earlier, how everybody's just kind of going through the motions and feels bored. I mean, there's the scene where Dolph is training the new recruits. We're going to get to them in a minute, and we are going to break down the plot as much as we can here in a minute. But there's the scene where I'm sure you know it, but the scene where Dolph is showing them how to kill a zombie, and the way he's just hacking apart the zombie. I mean, you can tell that he doesn't even really care. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, like man, he has a cool look in this film, I will say. I mean, the dye job, like you said, is a little silly, but it's like, man, he dyed his hair for this. We should probably say the character that he's playing is based on a character in the game. So the character of Kyle Walker is in the game. He does have slicked black hair, though he also wears a black leather jacket. He actually resembles Frank Grillo more than anything else. In this film, Dolph has the slicked back hair, but he's wearing a tank top and a scarf for whatever reason. But I think from the game, the only 2 characters that came over, to my knowledge, I could be completely wrong, but it's Kyle Walker and then the what is it, the experimental giant zombie? What was that called? Subject Zero.
Subject Zero. Yeah. Again, I think this is another realm where you might think that this is kind of like a Resident Evil knockoff, because Subject Zero kind of is not totally dissimilar to the Nemesis in Resident Evil.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so if we just look at the plot of this one, I mean, again, it's not necessary for us to go through it scene by scene or anything like that. But if we really break it down, okay, how we said earlier that this is a straightforward zombie movie that's very similar to Resident Evil or any of those, that's basically what it is. Okay. Basically, there's a virus that turned a group of people into bloodthirsty zombies. It's never really explained if this is the world or if this is just one particular town or one particular city, because at the beginning of the movie, it seems like the recruits that they get seem to be doing just fine. Or maybe it is the world, but we're just supposed to accept that there are areas that have zombies. I don't really know. But in any case, the government decides to develop a video game, I guess, where they're going to recruit the most talented players to combat these zombies. I guess they figure if we hire gamers, who kind of know what they're doing, then they can help build this video game, I guess. Captain Kyle Walker is that's Dolph Lundgren's character, like we said. He's the one who's pretty much leading these gamers and going to train them to kind of fight through the army to locate apparently a group of scientists that have developed the cure, okay, for the virus, if you will. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's hitting all of those beats of Resident Evil. You have the nasty corporation known as Cyglobe, which is pretty much the analog to Umbrella, like you said. I mean, I don't know. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I guess not. I mean, that is the basic summation of like the plot, and then it's just the kind of from there. It's kind of, I guess, it's a film of 2 halves. Like you've got the kind of recruitment and kind of boot camp section of the film where they're being trained up, and that's part of the film, and then the rest of the film is like a kind of find and retrieve mission, because there's like an antidote, and they have to go into a particularly dangerous area to get the antidote, and it's kind of a suicide mission, and then come back and try and get the antidote and the scientist, who is the daughter of like the military general, and then that's basically the whole plot of the movie. But I think like there's so much in the movie that's so kind of, I don't mind a movie that like plays with cliches or is a bit predictable if it's like fun. But I guess if you're like not having fun, like the predictable moments like hit so much harder of just kind of like, oh yeah, I saw that coming. And I think there's so many moments like that in like the training montages and stuff like that. And there's like the guy who says he's good with guns and then ends up blowing his own head off. There's a guy who says he's a natural born soldier and is like dead like 2 seconds after he delivers that line. And you can just kind of see everything ambling towards, like a zombie. You can see the plot coming ambling towards you and being like, yeah, no, I can see what you're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the cast real quick, I mean, the cast is kind of bananas. I mean, it's really interesting. Isaiah Washington is in this particular film, like you mentioned. What's interesting about Isaiah Washington, I mean, you really, unfortunately, you can't say his name these days without mentioning that he is the disgraced star from Grey's Anatomy. Okay,
he is
talented.
Yeah, he's disgraced. I must have. Usually I'm aware when people are cancelled, but is he being cancelled? Is this happened?
He was. Yeah, he was canceled before the cancel culture that we have now got started. Basically, yeah, he was on Grey's Anatomy, and he threw about some offensive homophobic slurs, I guess, apparently on set, and then I think he might have even said it like on a red carpet or something like that. And so, yeah, he was canceled and written out of the show. I mean, he's a fine actor. I mean, I liked him he was in a Steven Seagal movie called Exit Wounds.
Wounds, yeah. No, that's why. Like, I know he's in Grey's Anatomy. I knew he was in Grey's Anatomy, but I never watched that show, so I always think of him as the guy from Exit Wounds.
Yeah. I mean, he's what was the other one that he was in? Same director. Oh, Romeo Must Die. He was in Romeo Must Die as well. Yeah. So, I mean, his personal baggage aside, we can say I think he is a decent actor. He, in this particular film, plays Kyle Walker's right-hand man. But what's really interesting about him is it's like, I guess there's two sides of the coin. On one hand, you're kind of like, wow, like this is the type of work he's getting after he got canned from Grey's Anatomy, huh? Okay. But then you see him in the film and he gets killed so early on in the film that we don't even really get to see much from him. So it's kind of like was this production going for misdirection, or did at a certain point did Isaiah Washington see what was kind of going on and he said, you know what, kill my character off. I'd like to get on a plane back home. I mean, but it's just kind of wild. Like you're going to cast someone of that particular caliber, and then even this film decides we're going to get rid of we're going to get rid of him barely 40 minutes into the movie as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe they're going for misdirection, but yeah, I mean, like, I was surprised when he got killed, but particularly because I knew nothing about his baggage. But I was surprised when he was killed off so early, and the fact that he's only really in 3 or 4 scenes. Like he pops up once, kind of early on in the movie, kind of telling off Dolph where. Playing about with his gun. And then he turns up briefly in the training bit of the movie, but then most of the training bit is like done by Dolph and Oleg Taktarov. And then and then in the mission, he turns up, and then as soon as the mission starts, he gets to kill a couple of zombies, and then he's gone. And I have to say, like, that's also one of the things I took note of in the movie. When he dies, like, in the opening scene that we are introduced to that character, I think there's some suggestion there that he's supposed to be like Dolph's like best friend, and when Dolph sees him die, he looks mildly inconvenienced, not particularly distraught at all. So maybe their friendship wasn't as great as I initially thought it was.
Dolph is, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Dolph is like not heroic in this film really at all. I mean, there's one of the scenes, there's the other scene too, where one of his teenage gamer recruits is getting attacked by zombies, and he just throws her a gun and he says, "Make it count." And he walks away, and you're like, what? Like, what is this here? Like, come on. Like, this is the guy that we're supposed to root for here. I wonder if in the mobile game, the character does this as well. I have no idea.
Yeah, because I've never played the mobile game, I have no idea either. But yeah, maybe he's like kind of like an anti-hero in the game. I'm not sure at all. But like, yeah, I mean, that moment, just we were talking about that scene. was confusing to me as well, because like the character in the relationships in this film kind of came out of nowhere for me a lot of the time. So when she is like throwing the gun, and then one of the other characters, who's called G-Dog, is told that this woman's been throwing the gun. He's like, no, I got to go and save her. And I was like, did they have some sort of romantic relationship? Because couldn't tell in the training montage, but apparently, I guess. And there's a couple other moments like that where people suddenly have romances that I was like, huh? Were they seeding that in some way that I didn't notice?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I'm assuming you're referring to the scene where we should probably say spoiler here, but Dolph's character Kyle Walker, apparently he was bitten back in the day, I guess, by a zombie, but he has some kind of antidote that he injects himself with to kind of keep himself still human, but he's also running low on this particular antidote. However, they don't do anything with that at all. We get one scene, and then afterwards, when he's explaining this, the gal who he's talking to leans over and gives him a kiss, and we're thinking like, okay, so we're giving him a romance all of a sudden. That came out of nowhere as well.
Yes, that was the other one that I was thinking of when I said that. Like, so I can't remember that character's name. I think it's Marchetti, the kind of female doctor character. And yeah, she's just suddenly in love with Dolph, like kind of out of nowhere. And you're like, oh, did they maybe? And then they kind of play it in the scene like that relationship's kind of been going on the whole time. And I was like, has it though?
If we look at the other cast of characters, I mean, like I said, it has bizarre casting. I guess, you know, if we look at the young, I mean, okay, we should say the film is going for, okay, it's casting these young gamers. Okay, so gamers are essentially kids. Okay, so if we go with that, Chris Gallia is that's pretty much the main gamer character who supposedly lives at the end. I have not seen the show, but I guess he is famous from a Disney show called Jessie. I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
No, don't watch a lot of Disney Channel shows, to be honest. Yeah.
I'm trying to let's see. Romeo Miller, that's the G-Dog character, I'm pretty sure. But before he got into the movies, he had a career as a rapper where he was formerly known as Lil Romeo, I guess.
I was aware of that. I remember that, like in like the mid 2000s or whatever. So
yeah.
I was one.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you probably still have your membership card to the Lil Romeo fan club, right, Scott?
Yeah, I was president. Yeah. President in the Little Romeo fan club back in 2005. I don't want to say ?
And let's see, Oleg Taktarov. You know, I mean, I remember seeing him. He popped up he did a movie back in 2001 called 15 Minutes. I don't know if you've seen that one or not. But he showed up in that one. He's not the best actor, but he has a formidable presence when he is on screen. If they don't give him any lines and he's just remains quiet.
Robert De Niro in 15 Minutes.
Yeah, it was Robert De Niro and Edward Burns. Yeah.
No, I remember that one. No, the thing, like, I'm a big MMA fan, so I know that, like, I know Oleg Taktarov from that, but I also know him, the main film I remember him from is he's in the Predator film Predators, the one with Adrian Brody.
He's the Russian Spetsnaz guy, isn't he? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he, in this particular film, what's interesting, actually, around 2004, he competed in a promotional boxing match with Dolph Lundgren, actually, which you can find on YouTube. It's actually kind of cool to see the two of them boxing. But in this particular film, he's also under Dolph's command, but it's not a big surprise that he's also the turncoat soldier who Dolph is later going to have to fight. That didn't take me by surprise in the least either.
No, he acts suspicious throughout the movie, so like, it doesn't surprise me at all that he is I guess he's got that look as well. So you're like, well, if there's going to be a turncoat, it's going to be Oleg.
It's going to be the one who can hold his own against a guy like Dolph Lundgren. Even though in that scene where they're fighting in the room with the cardboard boxes, you can clearly tell that that's Dolph's stunt double. You know what I mean? Like, they really don't even try to hide it that well.
No, they don't do a great job of like hiding the fact that like there's a lot of the fight is done by the stunt double at all. No.
I mean, and yeah, I mean, there's, man, I don't know, Scott, if there's anything more that we can really say. I mean, yeah, I guess I shouldn't be wondering this or asking these questions, but it's really never made clear. I guess Kyle Walker's team is a squad of resistance fighters. However, it's never made clear what exactly this unit is, how they were formed. I guess they're mercenaries that were hired by the government, I guess, but they don't want to go into that. We later find out that the cure has been found. Only the company Cyglobe, who originated the virus, are, I guess, what are they? They're controlling it and they're also selling it. Okay. They want to have a monopoly on it. So then that way they can continue procuring money for the weapons that they're also selling. Right. Isn't that kind of what the big dastardly corporation is doing?
Yes. I think like, yeah, they and also like they're controlling the vaccine that's like a temporary vaccine, but also for some reason, they're a pharmaceutical company that are also like an arms manufacturer company. So they're also like making so they're making profit from both ways, from keeping the temporary cure so people are from there, and then also selling guns because there's still loads of zombies. So to keep the war going, they want to just keep the war going against the zombies so they can make profit from both the temporary vaccine and the guns, is my understanding of this somewhat confusing plot. That's what I got from it. So I think that's their big dastardly plan. So they don't want the actual real vaccine that will completely cure people to get on the market or something, and that's why they're trying to kill this scientist and take away the real vaccine.
Well, as we get to the end, or perhaps I should say the big twist, there are two moments that just I completely started cracking up at. I don't know if you did as well. For whatever reason, they are, again, I don't know if this comes from the game or not, but they're racing to Obama Bridge. That name kind of cracked me up. I don't know if that comes from the game, but I thought that was an interesting name to name the bridge after one of our presidents. They keep talking about how when they get into the gauntlet. Okay, the gauntlet is this area where they're just going to be surrounded by zombies or whatever. And so you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm thinking kind of like, I don't mean to compare this to Mad Max Fury Road because that film had 200 times the budget of this. But I mean, when I think of a gauntlet, I think of like a narrow passageway or something like that, kind of like in that movie. So they keep talking about, oh, we got to get through the gauntlet. And so they go to the quote unquote gauntlet and we get like an aerial shot of them surrounded by zombies, but it's just in a field in Mexico. And they seem to be doing just fine against this giant horde there,
Yeah, I think like maybe they should have picked like a narrower, like, because obviously this is a film of limited means. Probably they should have picked a narrower passage that mean that the number of zombie extras they had looked more threatening than the big open space that they've actually got. And also, like, it just looks ridiculous because basically Dolph gives this big speech about how like thousands have tried and died to get through the gauntlet. And like the gauntlet is really built up to the max. And then when they actually get to the gauntlet, you're like, well, they don't seem to be struggling that much. And then basically all the zombies are distracted by a couple of fighter jets, and then they get through it in like 5 seconds after that. And you're like, yeah, that's a letdown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should say that's how they're able to get through is all these fighter jets. Again, thank God for that stock footage, by the way, of those fighter jets flying over. But apparently, I didn't. That's something new, I guess, about zombies that I didn't know, Scott. Is that apparently zombies are fascinated by fighter jets that fly over.
That is true. I've not really seen that in the other zombie movies. Them just being distracted by fighter jets. So that's a new wrinkle. That's the new wrinkle that this film has brought to the zombie subgenre.
Okay, here's your moment, Scott. I'm actually going to give this to you. Okay, I know you've been looking forward to this, but
I am looking forward to it. If it is what I'm thinking it is, I'm looking forward to it.
Would you mind? Okay, because I have so many questions about it. The twist. Okay, the big twist at the end. I'll let you go. Your thoughts on the twist, or actually, better yet, before we even get to your thoughts, what is the big, the big twist, which to me felt like the ultimate cop out. FU of an ending, but I'll let you describe it. Tell us about the twist.
So the twist, and the only other thing I can compare it to is, before I get into the twist, the only other thing I can compare it to is there is a film which is a much more entertaining film, not necessarily a great film, but a much more entertaining film called Nightmare City. And Nightmare City has a twist where basically the whole thing's a dream, but it's like basically done in that kind of way where it's kind of like almost like a Final Destination thing, but instead of it just happening at the start of the movie, it's like the whole movie. The whole movie is a dream, and it's all like a premonition of what's to come. But the twist here is that none of the things that we have seen have actually happened. It's all just been a video game. They've just been playing a video game the whole time, and all the young team, all of which we've seen die, apart from Chris, are all alive, and then they're like, well, fun game, everyone. And then he like waves goodbye to the team who we assume were dead, but are not, because again, it was just a video game the whole time. And then he goes and has a lovely meal with his parents and, you know, the rest of his family. And then we're told that basically he didn't know that just a few weeks from then, you know, this would be the last dinner with his family, and just a few weeks from then, the real zombie apocalypse happened.
Only we never get to see that.
We never see that. He basically just tells us in narration that the real zombie apocalypse happens like 2 weeks after the end of this film. And then he became a soldier, and like the dead triggers became real, you know, like they did. And then, like, basically, so this raises many, many questions. The first of which is, did the government know the zombie apocalypse was coming? Did they develop this video game in preparation of the zombie apocalypse coming? Wouldn't it be easier to train soldiers? instead of like spending years developing a video game and then getting said video game to the right children, and then, or, you know, young people in their early 20s, I guess. And there's many other questions that are raised by like just things that have happened that we've seen happen in the movie. So, like, why one of the kids, Daniel, has a particularly disapproving dad. Now, was disapproving dad like a video game character, or was that his actual dad? And if it was his actual dad, how would they be in the video game? And then there's lots of other characters like that you're like, what about the MMA gym? Is that a real MMA gym? And why would that be in the video game if it's a real MMA gym? I'm so confused by everything when this twist came.
Ultimate, it again, when you hear that there was problems in production, it honestly feels like some kind of tacked on bit that was added at the very end because they didn't have the funds to figure out how to give the film a proper ending. You know what I mean? Like that's the only thing I can suffice to say about it. I mean, but yeah, it is a cop out. And like you said, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it struck me as well, right? So if the government knew the zombie apocalypse was coming, and obviously had some foresight that from years ago, because it takes a while to develop a video game, why didn't they put that money into, I don't know, medical research to stop the zombie apocalypse that apparently is coming?
Well, I mean. Yeah, I mean, and so here's what I was left wondering. Okay, the same things that you were as well. I was thinking to myself, okay, so is Dolph Lundgren's Kyle Walker character an NPC? Okay, is he a non-playable character? But then at the very end, they show a shot of him standing like atop a building or something like that, holding a gun. So apparently he really does exist. So apparently, I guess the government who's putting together this game put him in there to kind of lead the characters. There's those twin characters in the film that it's never really described if they are in fact like androids or something like that. But there's those two female twins that are in the film. I guess obviously they're NPCs, which totally makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I guess Cyglobe really does exist in this world, and I guess the CEO of Cyglobe, that woman, she is also dastardly and evil, like she was shown in the game, which opens up another question now that I'm thinking about it, is why would the company that is developing the game depict their CEO as being evil when she's really evil?
That was my question as well, because like you say, you get these after the twist is revealed and after we get this narration, you get two tacked on scenes. One of like the CEO, the female CEO of this company, kind of lounging around in her meeting room, and then one of like
the Starship Troopers commercial. Is that the other?
Yeah, we get the Starship. Yeah, we get the Starship Troopers, and then we end on like just like a hero shot of Dolph. So we're like, okay, so Dolph is possibly real, and Cyglobe is possibly real, but then Cyglobe are, as far as we know, in the story that's been established, Cyglobe work with the government and are providing weapons and are providing medical research and all this kind of stuff. So, like, whoever created the game, whether it's the CSU unit or whether it was Cyglobe themselves, why would they portray themselves as corrupt and evil in their own propaganda?
Exactly. It reminds me of, there's two things that this reminded me of. The first one, Edward Furlong did a movie back in the early 90s called Brain Scan. I don't know if you ever saw Brain Scan or not.
The horror movie.
Yeah, but the Brain Scan actually is about, spoiler, but it is about a video game that has like a Freddy Krueger character in it. And that one also ends with the whole it was a dream sequence. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, I think there was what was the movie? Disney did that movie with Tom Hanks. I want to say, what was it? Saving Mr. Banks, where he's playing Walt Disney, and it's all about the
the Mary Poppins thing. Yeah.
The Mary Poppins one. And so here that is, okay, it's a Disney produced movie about Disney. And so of course it is not going to portray Disney as being the the nefarious monster that they are. Oh no, it's going to portray Walt Disney as being just this ultimate, nice guy. It doesn't even show him smoking, for God's sakes. And everybody knows that Walt Disney was an avid smoker. You know what I mean? And they don't even show that.
It's very varnished down. It's like don't mention the anti-Semitism. Yeah, like
which again, we look at that and we think, okay, well, of course it's going to be sanitized, but then again, that is their brand. You know what I mean? But it makes complete sense. Why would the government, if they're putting together this game, this training game, why would they portray the company as being so evil? You'd think that they would be almost brainwashing them as being, I don't know. I think the more we're talking about it, it's like we're just peeling back more and more plot holes and layers. But in the end, the ending sucks. I mean, it is just so ridiculous. I mean, as if it's not like the movie was spectacular to begin with, but as soon as that ending is thrown in, you're just kind of like, what did I just watch here? And better yet, why did I watch it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is such a terrible ending, and like we've discussed, it throws open so many plot holes, and going back to that thing of like portraying themselves as evil in their own propaganda. I mean, like, because there is those like CSU ads, which again, like you always have to tread a fine line when you are like a smaller movie and you're like referencing other things, and then it can make you look bad by comparison. So like they've got like these propaganda ads that are very kind of Starship Troopers. You're like, yeah, I could be watching Starship Troopers instead of spending $3.99 on this, like. So yeah. I mean, like we've kind of portraying them as if they do like kind of that kind of style of propaganda, like Starship Troopers thing. But then they're shooting themselves in the face by also just portraying themselves as literally the worst and not to be trusted at all.
Here's another question that I was wondering too: is okay if all of these young teenage gamers are sitting with their VR headsets playing this game, okay, well, all of them except for the Chris D'Elia character were killed. So, I mean, so are their characters being killed and they're just sitting back watching everything unfold like a movie, apparently? Because I don't know about you, but anytime my character's been killed, I'll just re-up and start again, or I'll turn the game off. So what are they doing? Well,
I don't know what they're doing. Like, it'd be even funnier if they were just like, because like, I don't know how many hours this would have taken place over in terms of game playing time. But yeah, like, yeah, you would either reboot, like, and I don't know, maybe we're just not seeing their rebooted characters in the new mission they're doing, or they're just staring blankly at a game over screen for 3 hours or whatever. Like, it is very confusing. It opens up so many plot holes, this ending. It's such a it's so stupid. It's just it's such a slap in the face. I do feel like it was literally one of those things where everything in this production was kind of slapped together at the last minute because of all the things that went wrong, and they were struggling to get an ending. They didn't know quite where to finish it, and it does feel like a kind of last-minute rewrite of this, like, they're video gamers, it's based on a video game. What if it was just a game the whole time? And everybody was like, yeah, I guess we can go with that.
Well, okay. Here we are. Okay, I'm curious. I have a feeling. Okay, with regard to your recommend. But yeah. I'm curious. Any final thoughts, or at the end of the day, okay, what would you say about this particular film? Does it get a recommend? Not just as a film in general, but as a Dolph Lundgren vehicle. Scott, where do you stand?
No, it doesn't get a recommend on either level. It is a truly terrible film. There is, I would say, a couple of moments that made me kind of laugh. They're basically when the Rotstock, the kind of Isaiah Washington character, throws a zombie off a balcony and says, have a nice flight. That was quite funny. And then there's like a really weird moment where Oleg Taktarov is kind of holding the gang up at a church. And then he basically puts his arms out in a kind of Christ pose. And then he obviously seems unsure if he's doing it right. And he kind of looks over the back of his head to the Christ statue behind him, and then kind of reconfigures his arms to be like, oh yeah, this is it, and does it again. I don't know, like, it was a weird moment. I was like, there's a couple of Oleg Taktarov moments there that are not necessarily good, but are kind of funny, just because like he's not a great actor, so like everything seems a bit clunky when he tries to deliver one-liners and stuff like that. But like they did kind of make me laugh, like when he kills the priest and he's like, "Amen, Padre," and you can kind of tell he's really trying to hit that one-liner. It doesn't quite do it, But and I think like if there is a highlight, even though it is like his double, like the second fight in the cardboard is about as good as it gets in the movie. It's not saying much, obviously, but it's kind of fun to watch. But no, overall, yeah, this is a terrible movie. And also, like, if you're watching it just for Dolph, as a Dolph fan, Dolph does not look invested here. He looks pretty bored. Everything's kind of done with a kind of shrug. And so, unfortunately, I don't like really just... I think I've really changed as a movie viewer in recent years. Like, when I was in my 20s, I was way more cynical and stuff like that, and way more judgmental and way more kind of keen to do the kind of riff tracks thing and kind of slam a movie or whatever when it's really bad. But because I've talked to so many indie horror directors and people who work in the indie film industry, I know how difficult it is to make a movie. So I really feel bad when I have to just totally slam a film nowadays. But unfortunately, yeah, there's just not a lot to recommend here.
Well, imagine how I feel, man. I mean, I got to speak with Dolph's stunt double, who had an acting role in this film, and Scott Windhauser. I got to speak with him years ago, and so and here I am completely trashing this film, and I feel bad about it because I remember Scott Windhauser he seemed pretty excited about the film. You know what I mean? He talked about how much fun it was to make and how funny Dolph was in this film. But I mean, man. I feel like I keep going back to this, Agent Red, okay, which Dolph did back in 2000, 2001. That's always kind of been the threshold for as bad as it can get. But within the past 10, 15 years or so, man, I keep going back to that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, maybe Agent Red was a little bit better because that actually had a little bit more production value in it. And lately, I keep coming back to this. Many of these films are just... They're just so cheaply made that there's nothing really to recommend. I will say, okay, if I am going to give this film a carrot, okay, I will say I think there is a germ of a fun idea here if they wanted to play it for laughs or like a satire. Okay, I think the idea of the government hiring gamer nerds, okay, to take on zombies or to take on a threat. I think that's kind of a dopey idea, that if this wanted to be, like I said, a parody or a satire or something like that, I think it could maybe work. Unfortunately, this film, it doesn't lean into that silly territory, yet it doesn't seem like it's taken itself entirely seriously either. You know what I mean? It's sort of kind of in the middle. And in the end, as a result, it's just really pathetically mundane. Okay. While I will say, while the characters were bored, I didn't find myself really that bored watching it. I mean, I was watching it for its 90 minutes, but in the end, you're left, like I said, either wishing for a documentary about this troubled film or wishing that it was just left unreleased. Because at the end of the day, what we have is an unfinished and very incoherent mess.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I would also totally agree with like the tone thing. I think that if they just went totally goofball with it and just made it a lot of fun to watch, like maybe it still wouldn't be the greatest film, but tonally, if they just upped like the kind of humor and the kind of goofiness and leaned into that, like, because like you say, I agree with that. I agree that the whole kind of concept of recruiting gamers to take on the zombie apocalypse, I think like there's fun to be had with that concept, and like you could make like a good comedy action horror based on that, but that's not this film, unfortunately.
No. Well, I really do appreciate. I feel like I owe you a beer or something like that for paying the $3.99 to not only watch it but sitting down with me to talk about it for the last hour. But before I let you go, anything that you want to plug or give a shout out to? Obviously, we talked about your respective podcasts, but yeah, the show is yours. What's going on?
So yeah, that's the main things I do. I've got those two podcasts, New Horror Express, which I'm kind of winding down. I keep meaning to release the kind of last two episodes of that, but like I've just not got round to it yet. Hopefully I'll get round to that soon in the next month or two. And then, yeah, all 90s action all the time, which I'm hoping to keep going for as long as possible. So that's still going. The February episode of that will be Surviving the Game, which has got you on it. And then, just keeping... Basically, the concept now is that we look at films from the corresponding year in the 90s. So this year, we're looking at the movies of 1994 all year, and we'll do that one a month, movies from 94, and then keep doing that going forward. There's not much else that I'm doing. I do have a Substack where I review music called Notes from the Musical Underground. So if you wanted to Google that, you could and check out my music reviews. That we only recently started that. I've done review writing for a long time. I took about a year out from review writing, so I'm just kind of getting back into writing again. So I might be a little bit rusty, but there's like 5 or 6 reviews up, and I'm hoping to keep that going. Do like an album review once a fortnight. But yeah, that's kind of everything from me.
Excellent. Well, please be sure to send that along to me, and I'll put that in the show notes. So. Yeah, that would be really cool. Well, hey, Scott, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much for joining me. I did have a great time, and now that my show is coming to an end, I don't know where I'm going to be going afterwards, but I'm sure we run around in similar circles, so I'm sure we'll meet and chat again for another gem. Hopefully, better than this one.
Yeah. Hopefully so. I'm sure. I mean, it's a low bar, so I'm sure we can do it. Yeah.
All right. Well, to everyone out there who is listening, please feel free to rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever you go to subscribe. We always appreciate the reviews, and we'll see you all next time on I Must Break This Podcast.